I'm Nana from Tilburg for BizNews. Fears that South Africa could be ejected out of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, appear to have abated after the 40th Forum at Nasrec in Johannesburg. South Africa is pinning its hope on an early 2024 U.S. Congress renewal of AGOA, which would continue the country's duty-free access to the United States. AGOA is due to expire in September 2025. And joining me is a senior lecturer at Northwest University, Dr. Piet Croukamp, who's also a political analyst. Dr. Croukamp, having attended the 20th AGOA Forum at Nasrec, what is your assessment? Is South Africa out of the danger zone?
Well, you'll be optimistic if you think South Africa is out of the danger zone because our foreign policy regime is so unstable. It seems there's no coherence. In other words, we are not impartial, we're not pro-West. We certainly, I think in the past month, we have realigned our relationship with Russia. We have reevaluated our views on what's happening in Ukraine. So I think that has been moderated. Just this morning, the South African DIRCO, our foreign affairs, have recalled all the staff from our South African embassy in Israel. So it is possible that we could end up in some controversial middle land again, no man's land again in the next few weeks or next few months. But it seems like the Americans have more or less settled. When I listened to Catherine Tai when she was here, there was no doubt in her mind that South Africa is part and parcel of this African Free Trade Agreement that is being considered by the Americans. There was no talk about South Africa being marginalized or removed. Quite frankly, the reason why I wrote in the Vrye Weekblad that I think the whole debate has subsided a bit and the anger is out of the thing is I think geopolitics is almost more important than trade politics. In other words, if you remove South Africa from this free trade agreement that we have with the Americans, AGOA agreement, I think politically there's just too much that the Americans have to give up. And you will literally hand South Africa's policy on a plate to the Chinese and the Russians and all sorts of other opportunistic interests. And for now, I think the Americans feel they have some influence. They have managed to convince the South Africans to moderate their policy as far as Russia and Ukraine is concerned. So I think they'll think they have some influence, and there are lots of discussions. Minister Imran Patel, has been visiting America quite regularly lately. He's spoken to a number of people in Congress and in the White House and the American trade regime. And I think there's some sort of agreement that you can build something constructive, regardless of South Africa's ambiguous foreign policy sometimes.
Well, it seems that is the Biden administration that wants this. What about this congressman?
It's the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Joe Biden has a long history with the liberation movements. He was pro-ANC as long as I can remember. When I was a young man, he was pro-ANC. His affinity for liberation politics had not subsided. And I think that is partially what's keeping this relationship up. So he is fighting. I think also Anthony Blinken is giving South Africa the benefit of the doubt. There are some individuals within the Congress, for instance, who are a little bit more insecure as far as South Africa is concerned and who are probably proactive campaigning for a review of South Africa's position. But I also think that to argue that eventually Congress will turn against South Africa, I think it is very, very unlikely. Biden do need the Congress to support him in this. But I think South Africa is not that much of an issue in American politics. I think it's quite possible that they get the majority to continue with the AGOA agreement.
What sense did you get about geopolitics? Do you think it's important for them, to counter this influence of China on Africa?
Geopolitics precede trade politics. Trade politics come about as a consequence of geopolitics. And the Americans will always pursue stability in geopolitics and then seek to consolidate that relationship with preferential trade agreements. And it's much more important to them that in Southern Africa especially, but in Africa in general, that they have the type of foothold which they can think that serve their interest in some other way. I'm not 100% sure why the Americans and the Chinese, except for the fact that we export raw commodities to to those countries. I'm not 100% sure why they make such a fuss about Africa. We don't have a middle class. We don't have purchasing power. There's not a lot that they can export to South Africa. There's not a lot that they import from South Africa except for raw materials. The relationship between South Africa and America is a little bit more complicated in the sense that the Americans actually do invest in supply chains and in value chains in South Africa. The motor manufacturing and motor assembly plants in South Africa is a significant part of the trade between South Africa and America. And it is important. If it wasn't for those agreements, and of course the tax rebates that the South African taxpayer give to these motor manufacturing and assembly plants, it wouldn't have existed. But I think that part of the trade is of incredible importance for both parties, South Africa and for the Americans. So South Africa is actually, of the 34 countries that still belong to the AGOA agreement, South Africa is the only one with supply chains and value chains that can benefit from trade relationships in America. The other countries don't have that. They are exporting raw commodities, or they get benefit in some small way in precious metals, etc. But I can't even think. There's nothing particularly strong that you get out of any other of the other 30 countries. South Africa is the only one with a supply chain and a value chain connection to the American economy. And of course, we also export a lot of citrus and fruit and agricultural products to America. So we are a participant. But you must just remember that once we enter the European market, once we enter the American market, we still have to compete with American goods and services that are produced in America and that are imported from other countries and other continents in the world. So we just get the benefit that we not don't pay additional taxes, but we still have to compete on that side. So if we want to embed this trade relationship, we will have to do something about our infrastructure, about electricity, our roads, our logistics system. Otherwise, we will lose some of these benefits because we cannot compete with American producers and American service providers.
So what about this timeline of early 2024 renewal? Is that realistic?
I'm not 100% sure about that. It'll be very difficult. Remember, the Americans, what they seek to pursue is an African trade agreement, and that will take a lot more discussions. And it's a complex network of relationships that have to be established, and it will be industrially related and service sector related. So I'm not sure that it can be done next year. I think it's more likely that it will happen by 2025. We will have concluded much of that. It will be extended. And then I think what the real benefit of this discussion is that at AGOA was, it seems like the Americans buy into the idea that this AGOA agreement must stretch over a longer period of time. They talk about 10 years. Because if you want a real investment in South Africa's supply lines and value chains, you will need time to benefit those who risk capital and resources in your value chains and in your supply chains. And now 5 years is just too short. 10 years seems to be beneficial. 20 years is actually a real gives you the real advantage of such an investment. But I think there's agreement amongst the Americans that 10 years is something that they will pursue in 2025.
So what if Trump becomes president again?
Well, Trump was president and he didn't touch this at all. So I think many of the people who think that, well, the Republicans will remove South Africa or Trump will remove South Africa. In fact, Trump's policies on Russia is much more controversial than that of South Africa. Trump's ideas on what is happening in the Middle East and in Israel is much more controversial than in South Africa. I think they can hardly remove us or South Africa from AGOA because of our ambiguous policies and the foreign policies on these two specific events. If Trump is a president, and by the way, Trump was there and he didn't remove South Africa.
So when you were at the conference, did you get the feeling that that the two groups actually agree on the way forward?
Look, the devil is always in the detail. So when they sit on the stage and they talk, they say all these nice things to each other. You don't know what happens behind the scenes. But I did get the sense when you listen to Tai and you listen to Ramaphosa, and especially if you listen to Ibrahim Patel, and I think he's right at the heart of the thing, and some of the business people that had been at the heart of the thing, I think there was never a discussion that South Africa will be removed. That was not on the table at all. The Ukraine was not on the table at all. The Middle East was not on the table at all. What they talked about was the African trade agreement and the likeliness and the time periods. They talked about the technical details. And I think if they say, Catherine Tai says that we work from the basis that we will renew it and that we will expand it, that we will develop it, and we will think about it in broader African terms. I think that was the honesty of the discussion, the integrity of the discussion that did go on there. As it is, I think that the idea that South Africa can be removed because of our foreign policy stance is dissipated. I don't think it's on the table anymore now, unless we do something really, really stupid, which is not impossible for Naledi Pandor at the helm at DIRCO. But unless we do something really stupid, I can't see that we'll be removed anytime soon. If they find that we actually do export arms to Russia, or we export arms to Hamas, for instance, or we show direct support for Hamas. Just remember, in terms of American law, Hamas is a terrorist organization. We are not allowed to trade with them, to export arms to them, to support them in any way, unless we do that. If the Americans don't mind if we support the Palestinian cause. There's a lot of integrity in supporting the Palestinian state, because the Americans are also in favor of a two-state solution. But the Americans will not tolerate support for Hamas, and I think they shouldn't support any, if you have an affinity or a relationship with Hamas. And Naledi Pandor, when she had discussions with Hamas, she was walking a very, very thin line. But still, I don't think that will lead to us being kicked out of AGOA. But I think she really offended the Americans when she started to talk to Hamas, because that's one of the things that the Americans feel strongly about, and that is if you entertain the views of what they perceive to be terrorist organizations, your foreign policy is contrary to their interests.
Dr. Piet Croukamp, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.